Thank you all for being here. We are here today with Nahnatchka Kahn, Aline Yang, Aline Brosh McKenna, Marta Kauffman, Kenya Barris, Dave Mandel, and I'm your host, Lacey Rose. I want to start with David, you, and with Marta. You both worked on monster shows in the 90s, Seinfeld and Friends. And
I've not heard of either of those shows. That's weird.
Tiny little shows.
Weird.
What was the premise
I have a vague memory.
God, what could you sort of get away with then in the comedy world that you wouldn't be able to get away with now? And conversely, what can you do now that you definitely couldn't have done then?
I think we had different experiences
certainly,
slightly.
Obviously, creator versus
not
person
even
who worked there.
Our show was at its height during a very reactionary period of time. They had just done either the masturbation episode or the condom episode. We were doing an episode a year later about the two women fighting over the last condom in the box.
In the bathroom, right?
And they wouldn't let us take the condom out of the box, not even out of the wrapper, out of the box.
Oh.
So having done HBO and now doing Netflix, it's very liberating. On the other hand, the restrictions, in a way, give you a different kind of freedom.
What was the rationale behind not being able to take it out of the box, though?
Don't start me on that. It was just, suddenly standards and practices were up our butts. It was just a really reactionary time. When we did the lesbian wedding episode, everybody was up in arms and they put 104 operators on for fear of getting a million phone calls. And? They got 2. A month later, they got the letters. But nobody called. And the letters were all that sort of form from Reverend Wildman, was that his name?
He's still around. The guy who's still around?
What a putz.
Yes.
But language-wise, I mean, I did not know that about the condom. But, I mean, I don't know, when I watch a lot of network television right now, I'm shocked, I guess, by the discourse, if you will. It's pretty foul-mouthed on regular 8:30, 9 o'clock shows that make me laugh.
Foul-mouthed like shit?
No, like dirty
not
stuff.
shit,
Dirty
but
stuff.
certainly just like
Balls
implying...
jokes. A lot of balls jokes.
You get a bitch off.
We had a we did a balls thing on our show.
Three-ways jokes, boob jokes, like really...
They got boobs.
We did a balls thing on our show, and because we started Showtime, so we were a cable show to begin with. So we wrote a completely and made an uncensored version of the pilot, and then we remade the pilot for CW. So we did a censored version of the pilot, and one of the songs has a line: "Your balls smell weird. Your balls smell weird. Your balls smell so much worse than I feared," and
What did she fear?
and
How bad did she think they were going to smell?
in order to get it through, there's the guy at the bar that she picks up has 2 stress balls in his hand, and he's going like this. And that was the only way. And so it was like, because there was a sight gag there, we were able to use it. The balls smell weird. But Rachel didn't want to do it because she thought it was corny to do a thing. And I was like, if you want to say on television that someone's balls smell weird, they're going to have to be stress balls in the shot.
We couldn't even, when we started the show, couldn't say nipple.
No.
We couldn't say nipple. We ended up saying nipular. Because they wouldn't let us say nipple.
Like your nipulars are showing? Like that kind of thing?
Not quite. Okay. Not quite. But
I like that
You got
standards
the idea.
person coming up, like staying up late at night. Nipples. We can't say nipples, but what about nipples?
that was ours. We had to describe the nipple.
So what are the things you guys feel like you can't believe that you actually have been able to get on there?
We did a run where one of the characters was worried about his kids on the computer. And he was like looking up his kid, because this actually happened to me. My kid was doing a report on pterodactyls, and it's a sex act.
Yeah.
And I was like, we should do a different dinosaur. And on the show, we started saying, you know, rusty trombone and stuff, but we just started making stuff up. You know what I'm saying? A Brooklyn Dynamo. And it was really stuff. And
everything you can think of. We had a joke about spidering and standards and practices. We're like, oh, you're not going to get that past us. We know what that is. And it was like,
we ended up getting some pretty risque sex acts on. Chicken cooping.
I have no idea what these things are. This is why it got past them. The rest of us are going...
If I told you what spidering was, you'd never stop throwing up. It's just like, there's 2 things that are spidering, and they're both unbelievably disgusting.
You cocoon someone in a web? Is that part of it?
Not with web.
Spidering?
No.
Just experience it naturally.
The man puts his penis in the woman.
I'm out.
We did.
No thanks.
We did one episode where it was a whole thing about this guy wearing shorts and no underwear, and you could see his balls coming out of his pants. That they let us do, but not a condom.
This was on Friends. Oh, wow.
You blurred it, but or how?
No,
did you
we
get it?
didn't blur it. It was all about put the mouse back in the house, and he was just standing with his leg like this, and we shot through his legs.
Oh, that's
You wonder if
hilarious.
that's a male-female thing too. Who knows? Who knows?
It's
Trying to
very,
find rhyme
actually
and
very,
reason.
it really has to do with that particular standard and practices department. And so we just did a number which had a lot of sexy stuff and underwear stuff. And we got away with a thing where he takes her hand and pushes her head down out of frame.
What does that mean?
It means
Spidering.
I dropped something on the floor. But we had the
called a
S&P
low
lady. Low spider.
The itsy bitsy.
Yeah.
We actually invited our S&P lady to sit on the set, and she hung out and watched the filming, just so that instead of sending her screen caps and everything so she could be there. But you guys who are on cable and streaming, you don't have to worry about this at all. And I'm
what's
jealous, man.
ironic is
I'm
I work
jealous.
on a show now that has taken the foul language perhaps to an art form to some extent. They
Yes.
have very
I love
elegant
it.
combinations of fucks and whatnot. and I love it, and it's wonderful, and it's really fun. But I don't know why, but I have a very hard time when I am watching, I guess I'll simply say, the average CBS show, and I go,
Yeah.
whoa, that's filthy. I don't know what else to say.
Well, but we're always saying, like, you can take an ice pick and put it through someone's head, or you can, like, because people are killed on network shows in the most disgusting, gruesome, serial killery way, but you can't show. We had a thing where we have to cover Rachel's nipples and certain things, and it's like, I don't know, man. I think that the thing where someone gets garroted with their own belt is going to be intestines better is a little scarier than seeing a woman's
See,
nipples.
that's how a writer's room works. Just like that.
Exactly. I'm sure they've done garroted with the intestines. I'm sure.
Probably.
On Bastard Executioner.
Yes,
I feel like
exactly.
that was episode 1.
Didn't they do that on your show?
Yes. Yeah.
Often.
The
A few
three
times.
little
It's a big thing you
boys.
guys are doing,
Yeah. Stop garroting your brother with his intestines.
Alan, I know you recently had talked about how when you were starting out in this business, that it was really important to you to sort of work on universal shows and that you didn't want to be, quote unquote, sort of seen as an Asian writer. I'm curious when that changed.
I think it was just making a specific show, this show that we made. And I was talking to Aziz about it, and we just wanted to make a show that was about us. So it wasn't a political move. It wasn't a statement. We just wanted to be like, hey, let's put our lives into this show. Let's put as much of ourselves into it as possible and try to be truthful. And to be honest, we've been blown away by the reaction by the Asian community, the Indian community, all kinds of people. We didn't really even expect that. That's not why we did it. We just wanted to make something that was personal.
Come on, Denise, people don't get that fired up about racist Asian or Indian stuff. I feel like you only really risk starting a brouhaha if you say something bad about black people or gay people. I mean, if Paula Deen had said, I don't want to serve Indian people, no one would really care. They just go back to eating the biscuits.
Yeah, but Paula Deen didn't get in trouble anyway. I mean, she gave some fake-ass apology and then went back to making fatty foods.
True, but she did have to apologize, right? Like she had to go meet with Al Sharpton. I mean, that's kind of the punishment, right? You gotta find Al Sharpton and go have tea with him or whatever.
I remember you talking about how you had written a pilot a few years ago where you had written it a dad and a son, but it was a white dad and son.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, all the stuff I got produced was on a show called Parks and Rec, and there are no people who look like me on that show. Aziz was on it, so we wrote some stuff for him. Yeah, I think it was just a situation where I was maturing as a writer, and I just felt like the best stuff to me is the most honest stuff, and the most personal stuff, and the most truthful stuff. And ultimately, that specificity is what gives you the universality. And I know that sounds highfalutin or whatever, but I really think it's true.
Sure.
And with this show, we really felt like, especially with the freedom of Netflix and the freedom with structure and the freedom of who can be in each episode and what kind of stories you can tell, the time frame, all of these things combined to give us a sense where anything is possible. And we really want to surprise people. We really want to take the audience and really give them something they haven't seen before. And that's our goal. And for season 2, we're talking about how can we make even crazier episodes that they just don't expect at all. And that's kind of our goal too.
The rest of you, were there points earlier in your careers where you felt either pigeonholed or you were acting so that you were not pigeonholed as writers?
Everyone's looking at me.
No,
I definitely did, because after Friends, all they wanted me to do was create another multi-camera show, and I felt like I done that. I can't compete with myself on this one.
Right.
So I've got to redefine.
You dropped the mic on that.
Yeah.
But people want you in a box. This is what you do. Here's your lane.
Yeah, I didn't like that at all. And I did a documentary about, of course, Holocaust stuff.
A national nest.
Yes, absolutely.
Like you want another
Next
multicam?
step.
Holocaust.
Yeah.
And I heard they made you put a laugh track on that. And I was like, no.
It was just me laughing. It wasn't everybody.
I will say Schwimmer was fantastic. It kills me. Yeah.
But Robin, did you ever, at points in your career, feel like...
I was the only woman in the room a lot of times, so I felt like, people looked at me for like the wife joke or like this daughter joke, like, what do you think? Or like, and I'd be like, I don't like it. But, I wrote on American Dad, which was a cartoon. I've had like a sort of diverse background. So I've written for People and for cartoons and for voiceovers. But for me, it was just like the sort of female voice. One time there were 2 of us on a show, and like that was like, heaven had opened up where they could like split us into 2 rooms, but we never got to work together. Because it was like, we need one in here and one in here.
Well, someone has to do the wife jokes.
Well, exactly.
Exactly.
Do you feel like that came from, without names, from the showrunner? I will simply say, going back all the way to Seinfeld, obviously Elaine was the one female character, and we had at different times female writers, but at no point, at any point, was it the idea that somehow you're the lady write for Elaine.
Yeah.
We only hire ladies to write for.
I was the black guy who wrote for black guys. Really. Absolutely. That's why my show was actually created around. Originally, he's an ad executive now, but in the pitch, he was a television writer. And it was often like, as a joke in the pilot, it would be like, how do you think a black guy would say hello? And I'm like, probably like that, but I'll check at the meeting and see what we're doing now. That's why I struggle with the diversity slot.
Yeah.
That person, they're put into the room in a position where they're looked at as the diversity person, and they're already low level, so your voice isn't really loud. And you are, a lot of times diversity means you've come from a diverse background, which is different than the background of the masses at the table. So your experiences and your points of reference are going to be different. So you're going to have a little bit of a harder time catching up to what the table. And at the same time, if you have a lower voice, people don't care what your points of view are. So I kind of think that my diversity slot would say, give me a supervising producer. Because it's really hard when you're the lower level person and everyone's like, oh, he's a diversity writer. Even though it may not be said, it's sort of presented that way. Because you are often sort of marginalized and narrowed into a version of your...
Siren.
Sort of sounded like it kind of came when you were starting.
Yeah,
Yes.
weird. Really weird. Just saying. Stuff like that happens a lot.
That was the white guy police.
Exactly.
Coming for you.
But that's interesting, though. Do you guys, when you have lower level people, because I had not run a TV show before, and I don't care who speaks up. Like, I don't tell the staff writer not to talk as much as the co-EP. Like, everybody is encouraged to talk.
Our writer's assistants pitch.
Our writer's assistants pitch.
I always say I'm a comedy whore. I'll take it from anybody.
Yeah.
The idea. I'll
Oddly
take
the
it.
opposite, which was I tried to make a point of going up to sort of our lower level youngest and just sort of try to let them know. I do want them to speak up, but I also did say to them, though, I don't want you to feel the pressure to speak up. I'm not going to count the number of things you say, because there's the pressure the other way, too. In a perfect world, I would like to teach a little bit, and I don't necessarily want to teach the idea that just speak, just build.
And there's some...
So that it can work. I mean, it's, again, sort of, there's 2 ways of thinking about
That's
it.
so generous of you, because I just like write down on a piece of paper after
That was the last time I spoke to them.
There was...
On your scorecard.
There was
Like, what are you writing?
a friend of mine was on a show.
You'll find out from your agent.
And the showrunner, if you had a bad idea, made you put $1 in the middle of the table.
No.
Can you imagine anybody wanting to speak?
Is that a real story?
That's a real story.
Like a shame jar.
Yeah.
Like bad pitch, dollar goes in.
I'd have so much money in it.
We all would.
But we don't have, one of the things I really like about my room is we like everyone to talk. Like you said, I'll take it from anywhere. But I do agree that it's important to let the writers who are sort of getting their feet know that they are not being judged You know, like it's, but at the same time, I do want you to be emotive, and I do want you to participate.
You want them to participate, but just not the pressure.
I think the sizes of
You
these
want them to
rooms
think that they're
are changing so much too, where, you know, there are times on our show where we have 3 writers, and so we need everyone to talk. Like, we need everyone to contribute. We don't have the luxury of people shutting up,
this brings up a larger point, which is when you're with 3 writers, I mean, do you really, I don't consider that a room. I mean, let me start with this. I despise the room, and every show I've ever worked on has never had a room.
Oh, that's interesting.
Seinfeld had no room. Even when Larry left, and it took a couple of us to replace him, the individual writers were responsible for their individual stories. And then I guess you could, at some point, Jerry, the writer, and maybe 1 or 2 other people might go through and page through it. But never, my least favorite thing, and again, I'm only speaking for myself, my least favorite thing is writing in a room. I think you can make something funnier that already exists in a room, but I despise the group think. And every year when I do a pilot or 2 to help out a friend, and I sit there and watch them tear it apart and put it back together in a room, it's awful, and I do think it's why there is a lot of bad network television. I will say.
I don't know that I agree with that.
That's
because
fair enough. Obviously,
I
what works
find
for
that
you
what
works
a
for you.
room can do is keep you honest. Say, you know, this isn't
I think the exact
feeling
opposite.
real.
I think
It really
creates.
depends on
You've
the
been in
type of
some
room.
shitty rooms.
I've been with really good people.
I've been in
The room
both types.
creates joke-like substances.
That depends on the show.
Yes,
That
we
depends
don't
on
even.
stories.
That depends on the show.
We'll talk about, we'll have lunch and talk about like ideas, but hard outlining is meant to be done with one person and their dry erase board.
Well, you know, it's interesting. On our
That's
show,
really interesting.
We
Everybody
could not
does it.
do it.
That's
Yeah.
the
No, everyone does it
interesting thing. The
differently,
interesting thing about
obviously,
show running is like, you just have to go in. I had, you know, done some work in TV, but I didn't really have time to figure out how anyone else did it. It's like, you just go in, and it's like Nora Ephron said about directing, it's like making love. You want to go up to people and be like, is that how everyone else does it? You know, because you have your own way of doing it. And you just have to find your own way that works for you.
Of course,
and the great thing is if it's your own thing, you get a chance to. But writers are kind of subject to the environment, the culture that the boss creates. And I've also heard sort of horror stories about what people have.
And we prefer making love with a ton of people. Dave does it by himself.
So last year's roundtable, we
My
had.
experience has been, I'm sorry, you were,
I could not write my show without the room. You know what I'm saying? As much as it comes from a lot of times my point of view would be so specific.
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, it's a very conversational show. We don't do a lot of jokes. And we get into, it's a room full of love, you know what I'm saying, and hate at times. That we always still like each other. But it's important if I say I'm freaked out by 2 dudes kissing, that we finally get to the end of it, that I'm freaked out by a dude and a girl kissing too. That wouldn't have happened unless we went through 2 hours of conversation.
Sure.
You know,
And again, I don't think I'm sitting here to convince you all. I will simply.
That's
No,
work
I
for you.
find it very
But I
interesting.
will simply
All right,
say
so
there is what the thing that has always driven me crazy, and I guess this is, to also put a finer point on it, is the notion that here we are in our room, right? Here we are in our room, and you're the showrunner, and this is our room, and it's your turn to write a script, right?
Yeah.
Except on this script that we're doing now, he and I basically are just feeding it beat by beat by beat by beat by beat, and we've
that
done
shouldn't be
that.
allowed, though.
Well, but most rooms run that way. It's a circular thing. So someone is getting sent off. Again, I'm not. This is not for me to try and convince you.
Yeah.
No,
But
we're going to stop
people.
this.
People are getting sent off to write a script that they don't necessarily have proprietary whatever over, but it is
That
their
does happen.
turn. And that, again, I've always been a big believer in your turn. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to
That's
move
fair.
on. So
No, totally.
last year's roundtable, we talked about Lee Daniels had said that he hates when that's white people hates white people
When
writing for
people
black
don't
people.
talk about him.
Hates when white people write for black people. He finds it offensive. I'm curious, and this goes beyond white people writing for black people writing for white people. It's also
That
men
doesn't
writing
happen.
for women.
Black people don't get to write for white people.
They don't.
They do not. You give me one example of that, and I will literally start paying you. So I don't hate white people writing for black people. I mean, because I think it's been done really well.
Yeah.
Color Purple is one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't think it's fair that it's not being able. Like Alan did said he did a pilot and it was with a white family because in his mind, it's like, if I want to get this made, that's how I have. So I don't think it's fair that it doesn't go the opposite way. And to be completely honest with you,
The other way being that, like,
black people can write for white people. We have a better idea of your voice than you do of ours because we have to live in your world. You don't have to live in my world. You're a visitor if you choose to. If you want to go hang out with your girls and, what I'm saying, let's go listen to hip hop. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can be a visitor, but if I'm going to be an active member of society, I have to live in your world. So I have a better idea of your voice than you have of mine, but I am not allowed to write your voice and you're allowed to write mine. So, not to put words in Lee Daniels' mouth, he has enough of his own. But I do think I understand the idea of I don't hate white people writing for black people. I hate the fact that it's not able to.
The opportunity.
Fresh off the boat, you know what I'm saying? Like, you write an amazing story and you're able to channel that family because we're writers and we're all writers and we can all sort of.
And you can access a different viewpoint. You know, like for me, it's like, I first generation American, both my parents were not born here. And for me, the immigrant experience is universal. It's not just Asian,
Absolutely.
It's everybody who's felt that they have to be a translator between their parents and the outside world. Like, you spend half your life translating. Like, what is this? What does this mean? Like,
I'm that
back
too.
and forth.
I'm that too. My parents are immigrants also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like you find different access points and things like that for different kinds of stories. I mean, and even, people talk about in terms of gay stereotypes. Like, should straight people write for gay characters?
Jenny Erman's writing an amazing show about a Hispanic family.
I mean,
But what do you think? What's the answer to that? And do you feel like they do? If you are in fact gay, you do a better job at it, or?
I think it's that same thing of like.
I'll give an example if I may.
go ahead.
We have a storyline which they bring Selena a new Secret Service agent because they were trying to find a Secret Service agent who's more of a duplicate from behind. Usually the lead agent matches a certain kind of body type. So if you're thinking about a long shot from far away,
Why are you pointing at me, Dave?
maybe there's well, you're a woman and a minority, so that was a twofer for me. Yeah.
Right across here.
She's a woman.
Right. But so the and Clinton had a lead agent who sort of had a certain type. And again, it's a little thing. It's not like a body double, but it's sort of a type. So they bring her Clea Duvall, who joins our cast, who, of course, Selena, in all of her vanity, just doesn't see it and just doesn't feel that their body type matches, and it really bothers her. And so we introduce her with this joke, and she's sort of floating around the background and some jokes like that. And ultimately, you discover that she's in this relationship with the president's daughter. And there was a moment where where you'll see them in bed together, and we're doing the scene, and we'd written some dialogue, and I honestly don't remember what the line was that was there, but it was supposed to be like the president's daughter was kind of like, wake up, and it's like, stop it, like that. And we had some line in there, and we did the first take, and Clea didn't say the line, and I went, I think and I went over and I said, hey, I'm guessing that however this line was written is not the right line, whatever it was. Yeah. What would you say?
Right.
And I think she changed it to like, leave me alone, you big lesbo, or something, but that was the line she was comfortable with.
Yeah.
But I don't think our story is any less true.
Definitely.
I think the line makes it a better story.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's still a pretty good story, and we wrote good dialogue.
Point of view,
yes.
that we were talking about. It's like, because we exist, and I agree with Kenya, like we exist so much in another world most of the time. It's like, if I waited to write only for a Persian lesbian, I'd still be waiting. Like, no show
I
is
think the
waiting.
larger problem is
I know how to write.
But if I have to write for a Persian lesbian, it's one thing to write a character, but it's another thing for me to be like, to sort of embrace
to understand the point of view.
But I find that the bad writing is when it's like, well, it's a Persian lesbian, so she's got to be like some weird kind of like something.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
but I can write for straight white men because those are the jobs. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to be a writer, you have to learn to write in other people's voices until you get the chance to write in your own. Now we get to sort of flip the switch, and we get to tell stories that maybe you've seen before through a different lens.
Yeah, I think there's something to shows where there is that authenticity, and our show is about two 30-year-old guys who are Asian and Indian, and the guys who create the show are Asian and Indian. So to me, the difference is, Harold and Kumar is a great movie. I like that movie. But I'm glad that there's a show that's about those two characters that is made by people who look like them, because there are certain things that you've experienced that maybe someone who doesn't look like you hasn't experienced.
And not to say
that's
that
where you get
only those
those
people can
specific
write
things.
that.
We're not saying
that's
it's
right.
only those
That's-
people, but it
that's
adds
the
an
question.
element that people are
It does
picking
add
up
an
on.
element.
Yeah.
It really does. And
People,
that's,
you know,
I always think like there's this thing with the diversity writers where it's made a little bit to feel like you're doing it to be good or to be nice or like to even out the room for some like political reason. But the truth is, when you're doing a room, like you want as many diverse points of view as possible. You know, you want people who are older, younger, different backgrounds, different.
Not older. Though.
No, I mean, you're really looking for, and
When I
that's
say that,
been
that's a
hugely
different-
valuable.
Not everybody
so
thinks
you
like
want
that.
that.
But I really, and I really
that's not what-
said
that's
to
not whatever.
everybody we've interviewed, like, your diversity, whatever that is, like, that's a qualification. That's not something to be like, it's a special pass or something. That's something that you have that's additive, and it's been hugely additive to us to have, you know, diversity in our writers' room and our actors and our. But it's an interesting thing. Like, the only thing I can relate to this a little bit as being a woman is like, you want your difference to be acknowledged. Like, it's very important to me that I'm a woman, that my parents are immigrants, that I'm Jewish, that my mother was a Holocaust survivor. Those things are important to me. But on the other hand, I don't want to be defined by them.
Sure.
And that's the road that you kind of walk. Like, we have a writer on our staff, Rene Gubay, who's brilliant and is Filipino. Like, he helps us a lot with Vinny, who's Filipino, but he also helps us a ton with Rachel, who he really understands her comedic voice. And he will riff whole huge Rachel lines, you know, whole huge Rachel bits, because he understands her comedic sensibility. It's like, you want to be able to make that contribution because you have a unique point of view, but on the other hand, you want to feel like it's not important when I say it's not important.
Right. In a box.
Yeah, I think what I was saying is it's not every, you don't have to be that. I think the fact that you and Aziz are there, you set the table. You're going to make sure that there's certain, and everyone else does not have to be that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you do need someone who gives some authenticity. But the problem starts to become, to what Nach was saying, is that I was talking to a studio exec, very well-meaning studio exec, who was like, well, on The Real O'Neills, everyone's either gay or Irish. I'm like, that's a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? That means that there's been a gay Irish person waiting for this show, you know what I'm saying, to come on, or they would not work. And that's how it was as a black writer. You know what I'm saying? You would often look like, oh, is there a black character? Or if you're a woman, like, is there a female character? Like, I think that that's dangerous.
But I think any diversity, to me, any diversity is because you want somebody who's like interesting background. You know, one of our writers grew up in South Africa, and we have like a writer from the Midwest, or like, you know, a writer who's, you know, any background that is interesting, that has something to contribute. You're trying to capture the world, and the world has a diversity of viewpoint. I was just reading
And a good writer. Just be a good writer.
13% of Americans now are foreign born. And that's where we're going. And if you don't have...
That's the problem with this kid.
So Kenya, this season you've tackled some more challenging, more powerful issues. The police brutality episode obviously is the one that sort of got the most attention. You felt it was incredibly important for the show to do, but you've also said that you were terrified to sort of go there.
You know, we're still a nascent show. My success is still, at this level, still very new. You know, I remember when Arsenio got canceled. I don't want to be the one who, you know, say something and fuck my career up. But at the same time, one of the things about that episode, it was, people called it the Black Lives Matter episode, and it really was not.
And you purposely never actually used those words.
I've never said those words. Not that I don't support that movement, but I personally believe, like, you know, it's all lives matter, and you know, that's where my head is at. But I feel like the point of the episode was really, we're living in this world where there's so many images and things that our kids can't be escaped from, and you have to learn how to talk to your kids about this. Police brutality is one that, for me in particular, I had to have that conversation with my young sons because they did not understand why the protesters were mad. They love police cars. They love this. And I didn't want my personal feelings about the police, and my wife has different feelings about it. So I was like, how do we have this conversation? And I kind of think that was why I wanted to do it, was to say, we're in this world where there's stuff with politics right now, there's stuff with sexuality, there's stuff with, you know, everything. And how do you have these kind of talks with your kids and not let our experiences sort of scorch the earth for them? But at the same time, I don't want to tell my kids to not be aware that police brutality exists, because they're young black men and they may have some experiences. So it was sort of walking that fine line.
It's been all over the news.
It's the one where they shot the kid in the middle of the street, right?
That was Chicago.
Oh, is this the guy that got shot in front of the college at the traffic stop?
No, that was Charleston.
No, Charleston was the unarmed guy who got shot in the back. Cincy was the traffic stop.
Oh, wait, then what was New York?
Oh, New York was the unarmed guy who was selling cigarettes. They got choked.
Cigarettes?
Yeah, this is the unarmed guy who was selling DVDs. They got tased 37 times.
Wow, is he okay?
He got tased 37 times. So, he's not great.
For the rest of you, when was the last time you were really actually scared to tell a story? You wanted to tackle, you felt it was important to tackle, but you were also pretty nervous about it.
Working in network sitcom arenas, like whenever you decide to depart from the norm and tell a story that's not typical, I think you're always a little bit nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Like we did an episode this year about representation.
Mm-hmm.
The father, played by Randall Park, gets an opportunity to be on TV, and then suddenly all this pressure because Asians never get a chance to be on TV.
Mm-hmm.
So we were sort of doing this, obviously meta commentary on our show, but that's not a normal story.
You were supposed to go out there and promote the restaurant, not make a fool out of yourself.
What you talking about, woman? You love my impressions. That was Arnold.
Not on television.
What's the difference?
Name one Chinese person on TV.
Pat Morita.
Japanese, and you know it.
What's your point?
We don't get opportunities to be on TV. That's why when we do, we need to present our best face. Not clown around like you did today.
They love me.
You only have 22 minutes, not even 21:30 to tell a story. So you want to do the material justice and the area justice, but you also want to make it funny. You also want to not be preachy. So you start to get nervous about that. But it's an excited nervous, because you're like, I have this opportunity. I want to tell the story. I want to make sure I get it exactly right. And in a way, that's exactly what we're talking about in the show.
Right. Right.
I find every day terrifying. So, every time you hand in a script for someone to read, you're terrified. The first cut, you're terrified.
Do you still get scared?
Yes.
But you're talking, what your show deals with is the sort of the aging process. Are there topics that you were like, oh, I don't know, are we ready for this or no?
We had more of an issue with that stuff on NBC. Like I said, the lesbian wedding was a big, big deal in the early 90s. I think the network was nervous, so they made us nervous.
Yeah.
We weren't scared.
Right.
We certainly don't have that issue now because, Netflix is so open to whatever.
Lubricant, menopause. Yam, bam, thank you, ma'am. I'll throw that one in. Yes. So they'll pick one of mine. They're gonna name it the Frankie Bergstein Memorial. Now with life. Let me have it. I would love to host life. What is that? Well, according to the deal we hammered out with the lube, they're putting my art on the box. And I know what I want to paint. What? My vagina.
Well, partly what's happened because of the cable, the subscription, the streaming, all that stuff, is that there's so much bold stuff on TV. We're at the CW and they are like, go nuts, go for it, let us pull you back. There's so much stuff on the air now, people want stuff that breaks out and is buzzy. So anytime we come up with something that's controversial or whatever, they're excited about it.
I gave you a UTI. Not an STD, no STDs, just to clarify.
Okay, good to know. Whoa.
If it hurts to take a leak, well, that's just part of my technique. What has two thumbs and gave you a UTI? This guy. I gave you a UTI. I gave you a UTI. I gave you a UTI.
It's funny because I did TV right around in that sort of post-Friends time when everyone was trying to copy Friends. And one of the reasons that I left was because it was so narrow what people wanted, which was Friends or Seinfeld. And now
But
it's so
they didn't really
interesting.
want Friends or
They
Seinfeld.
didn't really, no.
They
And
wanted
didn't
Friends
know
or
what it
Seinfeld,
was.
but then they wanted to tell you what Friends and Seinfeld
Right,
were.
and they didn't know idea.
It was like a formula.
And they had no idea.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, this is 15 years later, and the climate couldn't be more different. I mean, I always feel like it's the 70s on TV, and it's the 50s in the movies. It's all changed. Like, the movies are very conservative in terms of what they'll do and what they'll make, and the TV are like, old 70s movies where
This
it's
is
like...
amazing time for TV.
About 7 years ago, I was working on a project for one of the pay cable channels, and I was working with an African-American stand-up who mainly performed in London. He had come up with this idea called Blackout, which was a white woman who doesn't think she's racist, but is.
So a white woman.
A white woman.
Just joking.
And every time she gets super stressed, she turns into a black man. And every time he has an orgasm, he turns back into the white woman. And it's about this black man and this white woman
Well, we've all seen that
who
a
are
million times.
trying to have this relationship without ever seeing each other. It was very, very cool. That was a little too loud. People felt it was a little too loud, and it was really funny and really...
It wouldn't be loud now.
It wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I agree with you, but back then, it was super loud and everybody was scared.
Huh.
Did you shoot it or did you?
No,
But
we
now-
wrote the pilot.
Yeah.
It was really
And
dark
it was for
funny.
cable, and then they were scared too?
Yeah.
But 7 years ago was very different from
surprised by
today.
that. Yeah.
So Kenya, there were plenty of potent images in the police brutality episode for you to be able to show, but there were also some real world images that you couldn't.
Yeah,
Can you
that's what I
speak-
was thinking when you were talking. Like, do you guys have S&P? Netflix?
Yes, I have. Oh, no. Well,
We-
we're on the
No, we
network
only
show.
have it-
You guys don't have it.
We only have it in terms of products. We just have to clear everything within an inch of
But
his
no
life, but
standards.
we've no standards.
You couldn't do Twin Towers.
That's what S&P. It wasn't the one we had network mandate. I mean, ABC is still a very, very big corporation. They have been unbelievably supportive.
Sure.
Like, they let us do whatever. But there were network mandates that existed before us. There's a famous picture from the Vietnam War of a little girl running who's just got her clothes napalmed off.
Yeah.
It's a,
Yeah,
I don't think it
famous.
won the Pulitzer. I mean, it was...
Life magazine.
To me, that was like a iconic symbol of like the things that like are of our world. And they were like, that's not allowed. We couldn't show 9/11, the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, everyone's seen the Twin Towers. We couldn't show the sign that says Sandy Hook.
Wow.
Could not be shown.
Wow. Just the sign.
Just the sign could not be shown.
Why? But that to me,
This
that's
is apropos of nothing, but I'm going to tell it anyway, which was many, many, many years ago. Myself with the two guys that I was writing with, Alec Berg and Jeff Schaefer.
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
We'd written this movie. It was a sort of comedy Ocean's 11 about a bank heist, and they all take jobs at a casino to try and rob it. Not the point. One of them is a Vietnam veteran who has good Vietnam flashbacks. He constantly like he'll see a cop and like stare at it and like oh, and then it's like filling it up with beer and like loving his good times.
funny.
And he came and there's a scene where he came out of one of the flashbacks and he had been like carving like topiary and he had shaped it into the Saigon police chief blowing the head off of the other guy. And at some point or another, we got coverage back from like one of these studios or something. And to this day, it makes me laugh because it said, first of all, you could not carve topiary or hedges into the shape of the Saigon police officer. And even if you could, it's not funny. And I wish I could
That's hilarious.
Frame that?
Yes, frame
Even
that
if
up.
you could.
Even if you could.
The thing that drives
Not
me
funny.
crazy is that where you can't use real products. So like people on the show are not
Drinking
drinking
everything.
Coke, they're drinking like yummy cola, and I really I miss that.
Takes you out of it.
Takes you out of
man.
it.
I
Takes
miss
you out
that a
of it.
lot. I miss that a lot. Like not being able to name check brands. Also, our characters really they live in the suburbs. They go to the mall. Like they would be talking about brands.
No, brands are
all
important.
the time. And it drives me crazy trying to clear, you're submitting 15 things to try and find a thing, like trying to do a joke about the Olive Garden, and it's that stuff is just,
But that's
it seems
that's
fake.
network to
It
network
seems
because
fake.
ABC will let us say stuff. Like we make, that's one of they will let us say brands and things like that.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, I was stunned. We did this montage at the beginning of the episode we wrote called Indians on TV, and it included movies and TV shows from the last 60 years and all different studios. Crazy stars
And
are
you
in
cleared
these.
all of it?
Not cleared. We didn't ask permission. Our lawyer was super excited. She said, this is fair use. This is parody. This is a political point, and we just didn't clear anything. And so far, no one's sued us. Cut to when this airs, I'm completely
You're
broke.
done. That's it.
When we did
We just aired it.
When we
just
did
aired
Dream On, we had this incredible library of this old TV. But then after the first season, the legal department discovered that if it was made, I hope I get this right, pre-1960, it was fine. If it was made post-1960 and the actor were still alive, we would have to pay for it. So, we would be picking a clip and go, please be done. We could get that.
They're so worried. I mean, and I understand it, but from a creative point, it really hinders you. Of course. Like, we use a lot of, like, YouTube clips, you know what I'm saying? Famous ones that are famous, and they'll say, there's one where we're talking about there's one, Barack comes into the Team USA locker room, and it's, you know, white coach, Kevin Durant. And it's like...
I love that one.
And it was like, we got the NBA to clear it, we got Team USA to clear it, and they were like, well, we don't know who shot this.
Oh,
and we're like, can we find?
I know.
And it's so, it comes down to...
And the question is, like, what are they afraid? Are they afraid of getting sued by the guy who shot
It's
it?
like, we don't know who did one of Kevin Durant's neck tattoos. We can't do this. Like, that's true. You can't do that.
Okay, so we're talking about sort of what you can and can't do on Netflix. I am curious, what did you want to explore that hadn't been explored on television, and why hadn't it?
Dry vaginas.
Dry vaginas, that was the goal.
You know, truthfully, there was nothing on for women above a certain age.
Why not?
Well, I think the
What about The Good Wife?
Just like that. Just like that. I mean, what shows center on 4 people over 70?
None.
And that was very important. I mean, the baby boomers, especially women, are the largest percentage of the population right now. And there was nothing for them. And as I find myself heading over that...
35?
Yes.
I wish. I feel like, where are the women going through things that are real, and what is it to be that age and be alone?
Mm-hmm.
That was the goal, and we couldn't have done it anywhere else. Certainly not a couple of years ago.
It's funny, too, because Golden Girls is one of the most successful sitcoms.
One of
and
the
people
funniest.
love it.
One of the funniest.
And that was it. Like,
Just
nothing
went away.
after that.
Nobody tried to do it again.
No one tried to do it again. They were just like, that's it.
I feel the same way about shows with working class people or people who have regular jobs. Like, we don't see any of those shows. Where are those shows? We haven't done one. Like, they
just died away.
They just died. It's like everyone has a sweet job in New York. It's like, all right.
You know, I know that they believe that television is aspirational. But, you know, they actually put that more on comedy than on drama. I mean, you look at Breaking Bad. That's not aspirational.
Hopefully not.
So I don't know why there aren't the same rules applied to comedies.
Maybe it is that Friends Seinfeld thing of, like, maybe after those shows came out, everything wanted to be like upscale New York,
definitely did.
Successful people.
Changed it into that thing. But I do think, and it's tough. And, you know, even here, I do think sometimes there are 2 separate conversations, which is there's the conversation of network, regular, you know, what was the regular networks, and then everything else.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, it is incredibly 2 different worlds. And why are there not all those kinds of shows? We're absolutely right. I think why they don't exist.
I think they're both
but
important.
They are both important, but I don't know what the networks are doing. I mean, it's great that you guys are having your moments and whatever, but when you think of, like, what it used to be like with, like, wall-to-wall really good sitcoms on a lot of channels, where, like, sometimes there were moments where I can remember on Thursday where it was like, I got to record The Simpsons so I can watch this, and in the other room we're going to do this. Have you had to record 2 things at once on a network in a really long time? I mean, they've ruined themselves. They gave away Kimmy Schmidt. I don't know what to say. So it is amazing that you guys are doing what you're doing. But dare I say, and this is, I'm not trying to be an a-hole about it, ABC right now seems to they kind of have locked in on sort of a form of their various sort of ethnic families, and we're going to do this and this and this. Even they're not really expanding the world. And again,
let me speak to that. I won't say the Goldbergs was looked at as an ethnic family. I know those guys who run that.
I don't think they're looked at as a Jewish family, but I do think they are looked at as an 80s family. In this case, the ethnicity is 80s. I know that's a fine point, but I do think...
I think Modern Family had the gay character. You know what I'm saying? I do think that they took a little bit of a leap on my show and then Notch's show.
Definitely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
100%.
And I do think that it's starting, and I actually pushed back recently. They wanted us to do an article about the new changing face, and I was like, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want that to become the narrative of the show.
I remember that.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not the narrative. The show it's a family comedy.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen to be about a Black family. It's absolutely about a Black family, but it's a family comedy first. I do think, though, that something that they're doing that's really important is giving people an opportunity to really see the reflection of what real America is.
Which I think is wonderful.
You know what I'm saying?
But I guess I would worry right now that if someone wrote the great blue-collar comedy right now and brought it to one of those networks.
But if blue collar was the identity of the show, like the 80s, you know, that might be something that they would...
But also maybe because there's no other blue-collar comedy on TV right now, they also might not make it.
That's something else I've been saying is also there's 400 shows. So to be honest, there should be 200 blue-collar shows.
Right.
There should be 40 Asian shows.
No, absolutely. But again,
we've got
I guess I'm obsessing on networks.
Dave, I'm curious. You come into Veep, and this is a different point, but you were writing the show when the real world has a tremendous amount of sort of absurdity to it. And I'm curious, does it make it harder to do a sort of heightened version for comedic purposes? Like, do you live in fear that people are sitting there saying, not as crazy as the real thing?
I'm assuming everyone's going to turn into our season waiting to see our take on Trump, and we don't have one. There is no Trump character. We wrote this a year ago, and we're not a real-world political show. We are inspired by, and I think even with Trump, there are pieces of pomposity and absurdity that we've taken, but we're not doing a real-life documentary.
Does it make the job harder?
I do think it makes it harder. I think I was saying to you at some point, you know, back in my SNL days, it got harder and harder to do parody commercials because commercials start getting funnier and funnier. When they were more serious, you could make fun of them. When they're kind of fun and musical or whatever, what's the parody? And there are those elements.
Why don't you check your phones? Sounds like you shoplifted a bunch of vibrators.
The Nevada State Supreme Court issued a temporary stay of certification. The count will continue.
My prayer worked!
Yes, maybe. You wanted help from above. Here it is. I really.
It's fantastic! What's going on? What's everyone cheering about? Is Mima better? Catherine!
In a perfect world, Selena Meyer should be the worst, most absurd character.
And now she's looking.
Right now she's kind of running second.
A few of these people.
I wish she was real.
I think, though, that's the thing that I actually, I personally think that's probably the best show on TV. It's my favorite show.
I did not create it. I will repeat that for the world. I think it's a great show, too. That's why I took the job.
I love the show, but I love it because, for me, I'm so not versed in that world that, as absurd as it may be, it feels like I'm getting a little bit of a peek behind, you know, the curtain. And I think that's what's great about your show. 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 I get to think that's what the diversity of television. For me, there's a little bit of anger I get from the American white guy because it's not necessarily just about them anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The TV.
The ship is sailing.
It is branching out. And to me, that's the greatest.
I'm sure you experience that as well. I do.
It would honestly make me crazy because the thing that, I was just going to say, the word that we keep batting around here is authentic. And I think most of the time, whether it was Seinfeld, Curb, and a bunch of Veep, usually it's somebody coming in or myself going, here's something that kind of happened to me once, and I'm going to take this and do that. In our old Seinfeld and Curb days, I kid you not, we didn't even read spec scripts. We just said, give us 20 ideas, give us for each character. You'd go through them, you'd read 30 terrible ideas. You get down to one and go, hey, this one in the stereo store, tell me about this. And that would be the one where the guy goes, oh, that actually happened to me in my life. And you go, well, this is great, these others are garbage, go off and mind your own life.
So weird and funny.
And it doesn't matter that Seinfeld had white people in it, or men, or women, or whatever. When you were talking about your show, when you just sort of said, it came from your experience, and originally he was a black TV writer. That's why it works.
That's why I love Seinfeld, because you got the authenticity of that. But the problem started becoming everything was that point of view.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Everything
I'm just talking about when I think shows work. I think shows work when they're wrapped into that, whatever the show is.
And you can approach things, I think, and be, you know, from authentic angle, but a different angle than people have seen.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, we did an episode about, and just in the room, I was like, my parents never let us sleep over at anyone else's house when we were kids because of pedophiles. It was some crazy, like, nightly news shit that came out, and everyone's mom who wasn't born here was like, no, sleeping over. Two of the writers were like, yes. Like, people could sleep at our houses.
Everybody became a pedophile.
Everyone was a pedophile who wasn't our family.
There was a rage in touching.
It was some crazy, like, nightly news shit that came out, and everyone's mom who wasn't born here was like, no, sleeping over because of pedophiles.
Right.
And fortunately, to give it equal time in your show, two of your writers are pedophiles.
Yes,
so
exactly.
they did.
We have to get that point of view in there to make sure everyone was
You
represented.
guys just did one with Melrose Place.
Oh, yeah.
So you did that one with Melrose Place,
Yeah.
and it was so funny because
Oh,
I flashed back to like 1979 when my mother was obsessed with Dallas and Falcon Crest and whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was
the relatability.
Yeah.
I'm not Asian. I'm not a lesbian Persian, but I could still watch it and enjoy
that's
it.
The thing, and that's like, yes, it is absolutely about an Asian family, and the story is told through their point of view, but they're not in the fishbowl. You know, they are telling the stories. Like, they're not the butt of the jokes. And it's for everyone who has ever felt like an outsider, for whatever reason.
The mass majority of my show is not black.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm sure the same thing with mass majority of your people, watchers are not Asian. Like, most of the people who come up to me are white. And they'll say, like, I love your show, it reminds me of my, and I think it's that specificities, they're like, oh, I can tap into that because I...
But all of these stories come down to something that we all understand. They're very, very human, authentic events that happen in people's lives that we all can connect to on some level.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to ask you guys, you're often writing from what you know or who you are now or who you were. How would your parents have described who you guys were growing up?
I wouldn't, oh God.
You sound like you have a great answer. We're going to start with you, Marta.
She's fine.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's so funny. I remember the first time my brother described me as a know-it-all, and I was like so shocked and appalled, and took me so many years to figure out that was right. But like, your family always has you dead to rights. It was so funny because last week at my son's bar mitzvah, the rabbi said, you know, from the Bima said, you know, that's the thing about Aline. She'll tell it like it is. I was like, this is spirit of bar mitzvah. And then yesterday, somebody was introducing me for a panel. He's like, Aline's going to tell you what to do, where to sit, what to wear. So it turns out my brother at age 7, like, you know, had me pegged. So, yeah.
What about you, Alan?
My mom, because she likes to brag about me, will probably list all the activities I was doing. So Alan plays piano, the violin, the guitar, the bass, the saxophone. He plays soccer, he plays tennis. He's good at school. Yeah, you know, so I grew up in Riverside, California. I went to a lot of big public schools growing up, and I actually am really grateful that I didn't get beat up when I was a kid because I was a really small kid. I was the only Asian kid in a lot of my classes, and I think one of the things that saved me was that I was really fast. So I was good at sports when I was a kid. When I was like 8 and 9. And so people wanted to pick me for their teams and stuff. So that really saved me.
Critical
Man.
for
That's
a
kind
boy.
of like why I like sports now, where it's like,
critical.
man, that saved me because I would have beaten me up, man. I look weird. Like I look
worry about
weird.
my. I have
8 instruments.
A son who's sensitive, like who's not into sports, and I'm like I worry about that. I mean, because sports is sometimes for guys the equalizer.
Yeah, it really
but it's changed a little bit because there's ways to be cool now that are Minecraft based.
My son will listen to these. The first time it ever happened was freaked me the fuck out. I come in the house and I hear some English guy upstairs, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, and he's talking, and I'm like, what's going on? And it's my son, and I think he's in some chat room, but he's watching a guy
video.
like PewDiePie. I don't know who it was, PewDiePie or something.
PewDiePie.
Watching this, and I thought my son was crazy.
Playing Minecraft.
Just watch, and then I started talking to everyone, and it's like kids he watches it for hours.
By the way, PewDiePie's audience is larger than everyone shows at this table combined.
Put together, I know.
Times 10.
I know.
I'm an old man. I hear music and I don't get it. I go, oh, that doesn't have like what I want in music, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I get it. You like that? Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I will never understand how my kids watch YouTube videos of other people playing video games. I do not
Are
understand.
there characters on television now or historically that you identify with?
Well, it's funny, you know, we were at different kinds of representation you see as a kid. Rhoda was a big deal for me. Rhoda Morgenstern was a big deal. Just that she existed and that they had sort of like a sassy Jewish broad on TV it made a huge impression on me.
Huh. I love that one.
Definitely.
This is going to sound real weird, but when I was a little kid, the Iron Sheik was really big in our house. He was a wrestler in the WWF, and he was from Iran. And his like shoes were like the colors of the Iranian flag, and that was a big deal. I mean, not to say like I saw myself in the Iron Sheik, but our whole family would gather around TV on Saturday and watch the Iron Sheik wrestle, and he was the bad guy. So everyone's like booing him and like cheering like whoever he's fighting, and then it was the opposite in our house. I had the little like standee, like the stretch. Anyway, it's random.
Kevin Arnold for me from Wonder Years.
Yeah.
that character, I was like, even though he was coming from a different time period, it was from a different culture, it was so much of all those insecurities he was going through, everything.
That was such a good show.
It was really beyond a good show.
I'm about to show my age. Rosemarie. On the Dick Van Dyke Show. I was obsessed with the Dick Van Dyke Show. I wanted to be in that room. I wanted to do the typing. I wanted to order lunch. I wanted to eat corned beef sandwiches. I wanted to dance and sing at all these great places, in Pennsylvania, New York. I loved that show, and that's what I really connected with.
I remember reading about that.
Up.
It's basically what you were saying, where all the stories came from the writers' lives, right?
Yeah.
I think like Gary Marshall, and he had a writing partner
Jerry
at the time.
Belson.
Yeah.
So I worked with Jerry Belson, who was amazing, and he told me this story. This is really not related to much, but it really has made me laugh. So they wrote a bunch of lists, like comedy lists, because they were young guys, Gary and
like freelancers, right?
They were freelancers,
yeah.
and so they wrote. One of the things they wrote was a list of things, just like comedy bits to submit for the show. And one of the things was list of things I only tried once, and one of them was carob.
Oh, that's funny.
That's hilarious.
That's really funny.
If you could spin off any character on TV from one of your shows or elsewhere, who would it be?
Sarah Paulson, Marcia Clark. I would just watch
Marcia.
round the clock.
I'd watch that with you.
Or Amanda Peet on Togetherness. I wish that, they would bring that back with just, I love the whole cast, but I would happily just watch Amanda Peet's character live her day.
I love it. Any other characters that you guys have written over the courses of your careers that you would love to revisit?
Not a single one. No, really, at least for me, the character feels like it has a lifespan in terms of where it belongs and how long the show should go on, and the show starts telling you when it's running out of stories. And the whole spin-off thing so rarely works.
Yeah.
But when it does.
It's true, but it's a very hard thing to accomplish.
It is, I agree.
Feels, at least to me, I'd feel like I was cheapening the original.
Yeah.
The Friends reunion question. That I assume drives you nuts,
don't even,
right?
That one, I don't know how many ways we can say no.
No.
We have said it everywhere, every time.
It's such a tribute, though, to the love of the show and the renewed relevance of the show that people have such affection for it.
They can watch it on Netflix.
and they are.
Curb Your Enthusiasm. When is Curb coming back question.
We get that, although we got really lucky with the Curb thing of sort of being able to do sort of our own weird sort of meta Seinfeld reunion, which I've actually seen online. People have cut out the various scenes of the reunion and some of the scenes where they were like reading from the scripts and sort of pieced it together to try and make an episode of what that Seinfeld thing was. But the neat thing about Larry is I do believe, I have no proof in the world, but I do believe one day he will do it again, or hopefully we will do it again. And I actually think that what's really interesting is that, and it's very rare, obviously you couldn't do this in most situations, that, if he picks it up 5 years from now, it'll be really fascinating to see what Curb is like in 5 years.
Actually, Aziz and I talked about this a couple days ago. We were like, if and when we stop doing the show, we want to leave it open-ended because
you don't have to end it with Aziz getting killed by a car.
Well, that's a pitch. That's a pitch for episode 2 this year. The rest of the show's just his dad.
I don't think my show is actually in that exact same. No. I really don't.
But we'd like to do the show again when we're 50. We'd like to do the show again when we're 60.
Where he is,
We'd like to,
the friends who are married and have kids.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We had different stories.
Tangential, but in terms of the spin-off thing, I don't even like the idea, and we are asked this all the time, when are you bringing Dolly Parton on?
Yes.
Oh. I don't even like that because it takes you out of...
I love her so much.
I love her too. I adore her.
I would be in for that.
I completely adore her, but the minute she's on the show,
what about lunch?
it's about 9 to 5.
Yes.
No, totally.
It's no longer about...
I feel a little bit the same way about stunt casting. You have to be really careful when you're bringing people on, that it doesn't draw focus away from the show. And they approached us really gingerly with the stunt casting that they thought we would be opposed to and was so perfect for our show. And we had Dr. Phil on our show. And because we have mental health stuff on the show, he was actually the perfect person. And just FYI, he's an amazing improviser.
Oh, really?
He was incredible. He's he's a really good actor, but he's
actor.
particularly a good improviser. He basically was well, if you want me to say this crap, I'll say it. But this is not crap I'd ever say in real life. And Rachel was like, just say whatever you want to say, man. Just say whatever you want to say. He was like, and then he just like went off, and it was so great, and she was so game, and he was amazing. And he
did they bring Dr. Phil to you? Because
they asked, would you be interested in Dr. Phil? And I think they were very ginger because they didn't want to.
But they had him.
Had him interested? No, they said because I guess whatever corporate.
They had somebody had touched him.
Did your Dr. Phil episode air? Was it an uptick? Did you get ratings? I mean, what does one get from Dr. Phil?
I don't know that.
Yeah.
You know, it was a help for some publicity, but I think sometimes you see shows do it, and it's a bid for that. And I think you're right. I don't think it ever really. It's only a good fit if it really is like funny and great for the show.
Friends did an amazing job at it. I mean, and that's what I was gonna say. For me, I'm so afraid of stunt casting because I have to go get the stunts. Right, that's why I was wondering if they brought it to you, because they always say, like, who do you guys want? So it's like Tom Cruise is on the list. I'm like, do you have Tom Cruise? Right. Or are you just telling me, like, this?
This would be a good idea. Play, like, the video store owner. Right. They're like,
that'd be fantastic. I'm like that.
Right.
But like, you guys would get
that does happen sometimes.
Would you go get them?
Folks. We did, yeah.
You would go get them?
Yeah, we would
But it can really bite you. Friends of mine years ago worked on Herman's Head, if you can remember Herman's Head. And they would get very encouraged to do, you got a stunt cast, like this week, big model thing, and we're gonna get whatever. So they would start with like the list of all the big models, and then they didn't get those. And then they would kind of go to sort of the B-level models. And then before you knew it, the episode was airing, and here's supermodel Martinka that they would have to make up.
That's the worst part. Stunt casting is an exercise in pain.
Yeah, it is. It never works.
Because you start with, we're going to go after Dustin Hoffman. And you end up with someone you think you've heard of.
Right. And you're not quite sure.
And they don't want to do your show, is what it feels like over and over.
Yes, and you have to take that rejection.
Yes,
right. The one time it's worked was this year. We wrote into the DNA of our show that the main little kid loves Shaq. And our show takes place in the mid-90s. And we were able to cast Shaq. And that's the only time. But I feel like that's
Orlando.
It's connected. He's in Orlando. It's connected. We set it up for like a season, basically. He was talking about Shaq and how much. And the fact that we actually, because I went down that road, I'm like, who are we really going to get? Like, we were going to want Shaq, and then we're going to, like.
But I would also argue, and having seen that episode, you crafted a very, very complicated with the door behind the door, behind the door, behind the door, which even if you remove Shaq from that idea, that was a really funny idea about car dealership.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it was almost like a game of death, Bruce Lee, like getting to the next room, getting to the next room.
Big boss?
Yes, who's the big boss?
Yeah, exactly.
And it was Shaq and it worked, but even if Shaq had never worked, that idea stood on itself. And that's the problem.
Right.
When the idea doesn't stand on itself.
And that's what we fought for, because they were like, well, if we have Shaq, let's put him in more. You know what I mean? It's always like more. It's like, are we really just gonna have him in one scene?
We've set up a thing all last season about Kenny Loggins. And we have him in the first episode of the third season for a very brief time. And the note they kept saying more Kenny Loggins. It's like, no. We have other characters to service. No, we're getting Kenny Loggins.
There's also an issue, which is in your casting of a show, like non-stunt parts, you hold the people that come in for like, whether it's the waiter or whatever part, to a really high standard, a really high standard. And then all of a sudden, because they are a famous movie person or famous whatever, you're going to let someone come in who can't act or isn't funny, doesn't do your rhythms and whatever, and you're stuck with that.
Won't cast people who won't come in.
Yeah.
Because it's too much of a wild card.
But it's hard to go, we need a large center from a basketball team. Can you bring in Patrick Ewing to read and all, that's not going to happen.
Right. Where's Kevin McHale?
Right.
Like, it's not the same.
Yeah, and in general, I think on Friends it actually did work. I mean, they were so big. But like, when Britney Spears did How I Met Your Mother, that might have saved that show.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It was like
and they reference that all the time, because my same studio, 20th Century Fox, did How I Met Your Mother, and they always still talk about that Britney Spears moment.
As though it was a huge success.
A huge success, but what they fail to mention is that Britney Spears at that time was going through like this very public meltdown.
Yes.
Like, it wasn't just she was just Britney Spears existing in the world. Like,
people were excited to see if she was ambulatory.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was the exact right thing at the right moment to get people to watch, because she was just, dominating every media
want to see people implode.
It wasn't just the name.
It wasn't just
the big name
Spears.
insert here.
But I think, I think it did do that show a lot of good.
Can I ask you all a question? How do you have time to watch TV?
When I'm talking to writers, when I'm interviewing writers, and they're like, I don't watch TV, I'm almost like, get the fuck out of here.
It's not that I don't watch TV. I do watch TV, but how do you have time to watch so much TV?
It's my job. For me, I'm not.
But aren't you working like 1 million hours a day?
I know, but with that being said, so I can become you know what I'm saying? I need to literally be a student of what I'm doing.
You know, it's really interesting. I much prefer watching drama because whenever I watch comedy, I feel like I'm working.
Interesting. I think
I sort of watch and go, oh, damn, I wish I did that
with
story.
a terrible drama. Like, I am much farther into Quantico than I care to admit.
Right?
Because I'm not a drama writer.
Exactly.
So true. But I do like to sample a little bit of comedy every time.
Comedy is hard, and I tell all my friends that are drama writers, like, you may be a better writer than me, but you'll never be funny. Like, that's a God-given.
Like, thanks for coming to my barbecue.
A lot of actors,
Thank you. It's been
But
fun.
dare I say, on the network side, I think they know what they're doing slightly more with drama because they can figure out, ultimately, there's sort of a 3-act structure, and ultimately, boy will meet girl, boy will lose girl, boy will get girl back.
Yeah, but as they turn it into 6 acts.
Well, no, certainly true. But
Really,
when it's
they
a
do.
comedy, you just get, I don't know, the last time I've done sort of network stuff, I felt like I was getting drama notes. Like, it was just, the notes had nothing to do with comedy. They were drama
You have
notes.
to stop taking...
A lot of time.
My favorite note of all times, Warner Brothers had the original script of Streetcar, and the note was, does Stanley have to rape her?
Not really.
So I'm like, well,
there's,
I look at that note and I feel better that it's not
There is
just
a
me
famous
getting the
story
crazy
that they
ones.
turned into 1 million years later. They turned it into an episode of the famous Teddy Z, if anyone remembers
I remember
that show.
that,
Where somebody took, I think, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, changed the names and resubmitted it for coverage.
Oh,
and
my God.
So that people, and got
That's
just
hilarious.
some of the worst coverage
That's
you've
really funny.
ever seen in your life. So, yeah.
That's great.
I love that.
All right,
Thank you
guys.
Thank you so much.
Let's do a couple kind of talking to one another, but kind of don't hide your face in the camera.
Can we talk about you?
Yeah.